Hey friends, it's Katie. Today I want to talk about where to have your baby. There's a few options. There's hospital, there is a birth center, and there's also a home birth. So today I want to dive right in and talk about those topics with some pros and some cons. I had to make that decision as well 2 times, and so I feel like I have a pretty good list of, maybe what to consider on this side and what to consider on the other side. As you listen to this list of pros and cons of where to give birth, if you know someone who's pregnant or who's kind of considering where should I do this, I hope that you would consider sharing it if you think that it would be helpful for them. My first birth I had in Alaska at a birth center, and I loved it. And then I moved here to Northern California. There aren't any freestanding birth centers in the town that I live, so it was either a home birth or it was a hospital birth. And we chose hospital simply because with my first there had been some bleeding issues and I didn't want to go through that again, and so I wasn't quite comfortable with a home birth in the case that happened. So I decided to go with a hospital, even though it's not so much in line with my personal philosophy. I met a wonderful OB and I got a doula, and so I was okay with it. But then I ended up having the baby at home anyway, in the bathroom on the floor. My husband delivered her. That was a little bit unexpected, but it was great. I also have kind of a funny story. A guy I went to high school with. I used to live in a little town in Alaska, which was about a 2-hour drive, hour and a half, 2-hour drive away from the hospital. And they started up the road and ended up having the baby. I think they were about 20 minutes from the hospital. They ended up having to pull over on the side of the road, and he delivered their baby halfway out of the truck. And so that was quite the story. I know in the moment he was not super excited, but now, that his kid's quite a bit older, it's a prideful thing now, now that moment is safely over. First on the list is home birth option. So for some of you, it might be like, and a few of you might also be like, oh, that actually sounds great. So I want to talk about the pros and cons for a home birth. On the list of pros, first and foremost, you are at your home where it's comfortable and it feels nice and cozy. Number 2, you don't have to go anywhere. When it's go time, you're right at home. Next, you don't have to have any IVs, you don't have to have any monitoring, other than maybe just a little check here and there, but you're free to do what you want, really. There is a pretty low risk to exposure to outside bacteria and germs and stuff like that because you're in your house. Now here's another really important one. You have immediate access to your food and your shampoo and your soap and your jammies and all that. It's just right there. And lastly, a home birth is pretty cheap usually because you're just paying for a midwife or someone to attend you, and that's usually not nearly as expensive, which is great. So with a home birth, there obviously are going to be some cons. It's not all just going to be roses because there are going to be some things that you have to take into consideration that will be different than the other options. So our list of cons would be, firstly, you're going to have to prepare. You're going to need blankets and towels because there's going to be cleanup necessary because, let's face it, birth is not a sanitary process. There's fluid, there's stuff. It's just, that's what it's all about. And that's okay, but you're going to have to prepare for that and think of like carpet and where should I do this and how am I going to protect my items in my home. So preparing for cleanup. Another con would potentially be that you're going to have to prepare for your own postpartum care. So that means you're going to need to also get supplies to take care of yourself afterwards. Another con, although it actually could probably be a pro, it sort of just depends, but this is something to be considerate of for sure, is if you have other children, what are you going to do with them? If they're old enough, are they going to be allowed to be with you? If they're young, would it be scary for them to watch you go through the birthing process? So that's something at least to consider. Could be a pro, could be a con, just kind of depends on what your family philosophy is. And then lastly, probably what's on everybody's mind is if there's a problem. What do we do if there's a problem? If the need arises that you need to go to the hospital or you need serious medical intervention, there is that transfer time. The next possibility is a birth center. A lot of places have freestanding birth centers, and it's nice because it's kind of the middle of the road, the compromise. You're not in your house, but you're not in a hospital. So I've heard a lot of people refer to the birth center as like middle ground, especially maybe if your husband isn't super comfortable with one extreme or the other. It's kind of that nice middle area right there. So for birth center, on the list of pros is it's definitely a quiet environment. There's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of stuff going on. You are attended by a midwife, and if you have a doula, you have a team there, but it's a much more quiet environment than, for a hospital, as an example. Another pro for the birth center is they usually let you go home when you're ready. There isn't a 24-hour waiting period. They'll let you stay if you'd like, but typically within a few hours, if everything is good and there's all the boxes are checked and everything's looking okay, they'll let you go home, which is nice. Another pro on the birth center list is most birth centers offer a water birth option. I had my first in the water and it was amazing. I loved it. So that is, in my book, definitely a pro for a birth center. With the birth center, there's also some potential negatives. First of all, again, probably on a lot of people's minds is if there's a problem and you need a higher level of skill than what you're finding, or if there's some sort of serious medical issue, there is transfer time. You're going to have a pause in between the time that you're at the birth center and you get to where you get to a hospital. Another con about a birth center is, unfortunately, most midwives are not willing to take on high-risk pregnancies. So if there's gestational diabetes, or if you have a breech, or if you have tested positive for group B strep, a lot of times they can't take you or won't. I know sometimes it's a legal issue for them, just precautionary. And then another con about a birth center is, I know I mentioned as a pro that you get to go home when you want to. And also on the flip side of the coin is if you're not ready to go home and you want to sleep or stay a little longer, or you maybe just feel like, maybe with your first baby, you just feel like, I'm nervous, I'm not quite ready to go yet. Birth centers are not really set up for a 24-hour stay or much like that. All right, the last and third main option for where to birth your baby is a hospital. And I was actually just sitting here thinking, like, are there other options? I mean, this is it, right? Like, I don't know. I think this is about all. So anyways, hospital. There's some definite, very strong pros to a hospital, and there's also some very strong cons, at least in my mind, about a hospital. So let's talk a little bit about those. Number one pro for a hospital, obviously, you are surrounded by a highly trained medical staff. They know what to do. They have seen this before. They're trained. This is their job. They do this all day long. Number two on the list of pros about a hospital is if you decide that you would like to have any sort of medication or any sort of pain alleviation, it's there. And you ask and you shall receive. So it's right there. Whereas birth centers typically don't offer that, and home birth, you're on your own, sweetheart. Another on the list is when it's time for you to push the baby out, you are likely going to have hopefully your OB who has done this hundreds of times. They will probably know some tricks about maybe helping to mitigate the risk of tearing possibly. And it's something that they do, again, all day. That's their job, is they help deliver babies. So that might feel very comforting, especially if it's your first and you're like, I don't know what to do. Well, there's going to be someone right there who will help you, who has done this many times before. One more little thing, and I didn't actually think that this was a big deal until I had my second daughter at home, but we ended up going to the hospital, and I was ready to go home. Like, they checked us out and I wanted to go home, but we did end up staying for 24 hours. But there was like a nice little silver lining, and it's that I didn't have to cook anything. It was great. And they sent me all kinds of fun stuff because I have some dietary needs, some special dietary issues, and I got all kinds of great stuff. So, I mean, that was kind of a pro too, is that I didn't have to cook anything. Okay, so now let's talk about some potential negatives in the choice of a hospital for birthing your baby. So, number one, hospitals have protocol. When you check in and you're in labor, there's a checklist, and you are on hospital time, and there's certain expectations that might not line up with your own birthing philosophies. In the hospital, there's such things as failure to progress, or the suggestions of Pitocin, or consistent, constant fetal monitoring, not being able to push in the positions you want. Again, this is all kind of part of a birthing philosophy. So it's important that as you kind of think through this, that you discover what's your birthing philosophy, and it might be right along in with a hospital, and that might be your most comfortable spot, but just keep in mind that if it's not, that's something to consider. Next on the list is, at the hospital, your provider, the one that you've spent, like 9 months building a relationship with, they're not going to be with you the whole time. I loved my OB with my second daughter. He was an amazing, wonderful man, and as I approached my due date, I wanted him right next to me holding my hand, but I knew that was not going to happen. And to me, that's a con, is that I had been building this relationship with this person that I trusted, and I was going to see him literally when it was time to push the baby out. He might poke his head in and out, but he's a doctor. He's busy. He's delivering other babies. So there's a possibility that I wasn't going to see much of him, and there's also the possibility that if he goes off shift, I might have my baby delivered by someone I've never met, which felt a little bit overwhelming for me. Another con about the hospital is when you go home is usually not up to you at all. Typically it's 24 hours as long as everything is looking good, but if there's a problem, they'll say we're going to keep you a little bit longer, and there really isn't a whole lot that you can do. One other thing that I want to throw in here on the list of cons for a hospital birth is it's pretty much a fact that you're more likely to have a C-section at the hospital than you will a birth center or at home. Now, why do you think that is? You can't have a C-section at a birth center or at home. It's not a possibility. There's nothing against C-sections. I'm grateful because I know that they save lives, and that's great. However, it's just something to consider that it's more likely, it's just kind of a fact because of where you are, that potential exists more than it would in the other two choices. All right, so in summary, I would like to say that there is no right or wrong answer here. This is all going to be about you and your birth philosophy and where you feel like healthcare providers belong in this whole pregnancy thing. You have to decide what's best for you, what feels right for you, and like I said, there is no right or wrong. If hospital feels best for you, do the hospital. You need to be in a place where you feel most comfortable. If you want to do it at home, you go, girl, do it at home. This is an encouragement to think about what feels the best for you and for your soul, and what gives you the least amount of angst. I mean, I know pushing out a baby gives most people angst, but you don't need more added to it. So figure out what feels most comfortable and research and do it. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I hope that it has been helpful. If it has, I would be honored if you would consider sharing it with any of your pregnant mama friends. And also, if you liked it, give it a thumbs up, give me a like, makes me feel good. And I'd also like to invite you to become a subscriber. If you are not a subscriber, it will give you notifications if you choose of when we are doing a new video and when we've dropped a new video. We shoot a video every week, so we would be honored if you would join with us on our journey. We have a Facebook page, we have a blog, so we'd love for you to join us in one of those areas. And I think that's it, guys. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.